Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Duke Vitally, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber and vlogging YouTuber right now because I'm just giving you guys a little quick tour of my room. I'll get to the CDs in a sec, but I just wanted to cover this so I could tell you guys what you're seeing in the background of my videos so you kind of know what you're looking at. First of all, I just hung this painting up. It's kind of a collector's item from like the 80s. It's kind of like a culture piece. I thought I'd tie the whole thing together. And then I got all this stuff here. First of all, there's no parking, obviously. You got this thing my friend drew of Patrick Bateman. It says vibe check on it. It was really funny when the meme was relevant. It's still pretty funny, just because I laughed about it before. You got the Bruh Zone, because, we're always in the Bruh Zone. Got this drawing of Alien. Alien is one of my favorite movies. I just love that series. And, not a lot of people liked Alien Covenant, but I liked it. That's actually from a comic book that actually I reviewed way back in, I want to say sophomore year of high school. It's crazy. So then I got this cherubim right here. I just love him. Look at his abs, dude. That dude, he's pretty jacked, kind of like me. So I kind of like him for that. This is a picture of me and my dog Biscuit. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Biscuit on my channel. I've probably mentioned him once or twice, but that's me before I had a beard. This is a Neutral Milk Hotel thing. It's kind of spoiler for one of the CDs I have because it's right there. And then I got this big poster of Rain in Blood. I needed a poster to tie the room together, and out of all the posters I saw there, this was the least cringe, probably the most relevant. So yeah, that's the things you guys will be seeing in the background when I'm recording videos, and that's just all I wanted to show you. And now we'll get to the CDs. And now we're here, so I'm gonna show you guys my CD collection. First of all, I collect CDs for a couple reasons. One, I really like the medium. I think they work well, and I like it kind of forces you to listen to the whole album rather than just individual songs. And I've always been a fan more of an album as a whole rather than just songs. Also, I would collect vinyl, but one, I don't have a record player, and two, I live in a house with three other boys where there's no way I can find any bit of silence ever. So that's the main issue there. But I collect CDs because I'll play them in the car, and my brothers can't really argue about it, so that's fun. So I'm just gonna go down the pile because there's no real reason this has to be in order. So first I got this 10,000 Days. I actually really dislike this case because there's sort of an adhesive inside where the CD gets stuck. But I actually really like this album. I mean, it's not fantastic. It's not perfect. I think Rosetta Stone is a weaker track, but Tool is one of my favorite bands, and I think the A side is pretty much one of the best things Tool's ever done. So if you haven't checked it out, it's great. It's a fun little collector's item too. It doesn't fit in a CD case because it's so just bulky, but I really enjoy it. Next, I'm actually going to talk about this album pretty soon on the channel, but it's Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins. This was one of my first CDs. I got it because I was really into Smashing Pumpkins at the time, and I thought this was going to be their best album. Spoiler alert, it's not their best album. Siamese Dreams is kind of miles ahead of it, but it's definitely got some good hits on it. I think the very beginning of the album, the first 5 tracks in a row are great, and I think the ending is really strong too, but it's kind of spotty for the rest of it, in my opinion at least. But yeah, a lot of strong tracks on here. This next one I have not yet listened to on CD format, but it's College Dropout by Kanye West. This is probably his best album, but he's got a lot of strong ones, Jesus Walks is one of my favorite songs of all time, so I totally love this one. It's a great collector's item if you're collecting CDs. It's kind of essential for a rap catalog. I haven't mentioned this band that much, but this is Pre-Kel by Ghost. It's one of my favorite Ghost albums, this one and Meliora, and I know most people are like, oh, you don't like the first album as much, and I'm like, no, it's just kind of uglier than I think it has to be. And, a lot of people are like, oh, it's pop, why do you like them? It's not really pop. I would call it glam metal, actually. This is a much more fair definition of glam metal than, the 80s hair metal style. I like it a lot. I think this album's great. Rats is a great song. I love See the Light. Not a lot of people like it that much, but it's one of my favorite tracks. Now for some real metal, we have the thrash metal classic Rain in Blood by Slayer. I have the poster back there. No, they did not come with each other, but I got this when I went to a metal record store. I love this album. It's great. Raining Blood is on my D&D Fight playlist. It's just such a classic. Every time it comes on, it's just such a banger. A lot of classics on here. It's seriously essential metal listening. If you don't listen to this album and you think you're into metal, then you're really not, because you kind of have to listen to this one. But it's great. It's pretty iconic riffs. Yeah, I love it. This one I got really lucky for finding in person. You probably don't recognize it from this cover, but if I pull it out, It is Visli Se Taos by Burzum. This thing is phenomenal. Easily one of the top 5 black metal records of all time, in my opinion. Of course, I'm kind of just diving into the genre right now, but this thing is such a classic. And this thing I will talk about for just forever because it's, first of all, it's essential black metal listening. It's just a classic. And I have a very emotional connection to this album, and I'll probably discuss that in a future video, but I love it so, so much, and if you're getting into black metal, absolutely listen to this one. Up next, this is probably one of my favorite albums of all time, maybe like top 10, and another thing I like about it a lot is that my dad also really likes it, and I don't like a lot of the same things my dad likes, because my tastes, I don't mean to sound pretentious, but my tastes are a lot more eclectic than his, because, you know, boomer taste, but this is probably the best boomer rock album of all time. It's also a prog album, Farewell to Kings by Rush. This is my favorite Rush album. I think it's better than their other stuff. I love 2112. I love Moving Pictures, but nothing beats this one. Come on, you got Xanadu. Xanadu is just a classic, and Cygnus X1 is one of the best ways to end the album. Then it transfers into Hemispheres, which I need to listen to Hemispheres again. I wasn't in love with it last time I heard it, but there was a meme on Mew for a while that people called it the best prog album of all time. This thing is a classic. If you don't listen to it, I think that your life is not fulfilled. This thing is cover to cover just total bangers, and it's never, if you're like not into prog because you think it's too drawn out and boring, this thing is packed, it's a brick, just dense of action the whole way through. It is instant classic. This is one of the best albums of all time, in my opinion. I love it so, so much, and anyone who disagrees, you're objectively wrong. I'm sorry. Next we have not my favorite album from this group, but it's a total classic. You got Power Slave by Iron Maiden. I would honestly argue that Iron Maiden is kind of a power metal band, not for the pun, but with Bruce Dickinson's voice, it's kind of power metal-y. And if people call Rainbow's Rising power metal, I think you could call this power metal. It's a great album. There are a lot of classics on here, like The Mariner, 2 Minutes to Midnight. You know, they're awesome. It's not my favorite Iron Maiden album. We'll get to my favorite Iron Maiden album in a couple minutes. This next album I don't think is completely perfect, but it's so much fun, and it's really funky and great, and I would recommend this album to pretty much anyone. It was actually one of the first albums I got into. This is Frizzle Fry by Primus. This thing has inspired me so much. I just love Primus and how the whole like mindset behind it is that they are ironic with the words. Like the words are obviously jokes, but the grooves are so intense and funky that it's great. Also, I think his bass tone is so ugly, but at the same time it's really effective, so I just love it. Great album. Also, really great album cover. I don't know if you guys can see it too well. I might put a picture up, but it's just the guy in the frying pan. It makes no sense, but I love it. Next is sort of essential heavy metal listening. It's Holy Diver by Dio. I don't know why I forgot about that, but this is a classic album. It's got a lot of good songs. I love Rainbow in the Dark. It's probably one of my favorite heavy metal songs, and you can't forget Holy Diver. Holy Diver is just super great. As someone from California, this is kind of an essential listening album. I love it to death. This was my favorite band not that long ago even, and I'm aware that their presence is very commercial and very much appealing to the normies, but I think this album's a classic, and there's a lot of really good songs on here. It's my favorite in their catalog, but I haven't listened to their early stuff, and I actually might like that stuff more now that I've grown a bit, but I love Californication. This thing has my favorite opening track of any Chili Peppers album, and pretty much any poppy album ever for that regard. It's so effective. That bass line is crushingly good. I love this album to death. Give it a listen if you haven't already. Going back to the whole prog idea, we got this absolute classic, In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. I had to order this. I was at a Barnes & Noble when I ordered this from their desk. Because, you know, their selection isn't that great when you actually, like, walk into there. But I love this album. This thing is a classic. My favorite track is probably the self-titled track, you know, the In the Court of the Crimson King. It's a great song. It's a very depressing album, but 21st Century Schizoid Man laid the groundworks for so much prog after. It's truly just a classic just throughout. I love this album. If you haven't listened to this album, you seriously need to. This is like essential music listening. Like you can't get into jazz without this. You can't get into rock without this. You can't get into prog without this. This thing is as essential as listening gets. Probably the most essential album I have. It was about time I started talking about this band. This is not my favorite album by them, but I think in terms of diversity in their sound, it's necessary to listen to understand their discography. This is In Rainbows by Radiohead. I love this album. It's a really good one. since they released it online for free and download, this is like it's relatively cheap in terms of packaging, but it does come with some stickers to make your own like CD case. But I'm actually just gonna use it on a notebook or something, so it's a nice little collector's piece. But also, it's just got a great cover design, even though it's just on like this like cardboard wrapping. But it's fun. A lot of good songs on here. 13 Step, a lot of people say is a classic. I remember I got an Instagram comment saying that 13 Step should be our new national anthem. No pun intended, because, national anthem Radiohead. But yeah, it's a classic. My favorite song on here is probably Videotape, but it's just cover to cover classics, so it's a great one. This next album I actually got for a Halloween costume. If you know the movie, you know the movie. It's 4 by Huey Lewis and the News. My CD here is actually it skips a lot, and it's kind of broken in that regard, but it's actually not a bad album. The only song I would say I dislike on here is Simple as That, which is the last track. It's really good 80s pop. It's fun. I think Jacob's Ladder is a really good opening, and come on, Hip to Be Square. I could, man, inspired pretty much one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever. I love American Psycho, so like that's kind of why I listened to this in the first place. But it's actually pretty good. So listen to it if you like 80s pop. So this next album I have to place my hands specially over because I don't want to get my video banned or anything. But this is the Money Store. Oh, there, Money Store by Death Grips. This is not my favorite album by theirs, but it's easily their most essential. It's probably their most classic as well. My favorite's Bottomless Pit. We'll get to that. But this one, it's a very good album. It's cover to cover classics. Everyone's got a favorite song on here. I've Seen Footage is such a classic. Like, if you haven't listened to that song, then you're missing out. That's like one of the best songs of last decade. Also, the opener, Get Got, like that opening riff is like super iconic. Pretty legendary album here. It's great. It's a good thing to add to your CD collection. If not for the cover alone, this thing is crazy. Speaking of Bottomless Pit, bam, absolute classic. This is my favorite album of the 2010s, just straight up. I know a lot of people are like, oh, T-Pab or this or that. Nah, I gotta say Bottomless Pit. This thing absolutely destroys. The noise rock elements on this thing are incredible. The opening track, Giving Bad People, I think is probably my favorite Death Grips opening track. Probably my favorite opening track of last decade. Amazing. Like, that thing is unrelenting. And then the title track, Bottomless Pit, that sort of rounds out the album, completes the circle overall. And there are a couple more low-key tracks on this album that a lot of Death Grips albums are actually missing, but they still maintain a lot of energy and punch to them. This thing is violently good. If you can't really see the face on the cover, but like this thing is terrifying with just that face right there. I love this album so much. This next album, actually, not a lot of people liked, especially critics, but I think it's actually a total classic. I had a professor actually recommend this album to me, and I haven't listened to the rest of their discography, but I heard it's very different. This is Low, Double Negative. I love this album so much. The glitch elements are like kind of incredible. The fact that it uses static as percussion I thought it was pretty innovative, and this thing is like really just beautiful. If you haven't listened to it, I actually really recommend it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But I love this thing so much. I saw it at a record store and was like, wow, I can't believe I found it. And, some people don't like it that much, but I love this thing. The whole way through, it's just a sonic trip. It's pretty great. This album, I actually like more than Leviathan, but I love this album. This is Crack the Sky by Mastodon. I think just as a Mastodon album, it's probably the most emotionally gratifying. I love it cover to cover. It's more accessible than Leviathan. It's a lot less metal, even though it's still metal, especially the title track, Crack the Sky. This thing is super awesome. The Last Baron is one of my favorite songs from Mastodon, probably my favorite song from Mastodon, and it really completes this album. This thing is a very complete emotional journey, and the concept behind it is really cool too, especially how it's also about the drummer's sister, rest in peace. But it's just super great. I recommend this to a lot of people. Back to Death Grips, you've got probably one of their two most underrated albums, the other being Government Plates. I love Government Plates, but this thing is Year of the Snitch. Their final full-length release, this thing is a total meme, and the concept behind it makes it so much better. I love how there's just tracks on there that sample themselves. I love how they have Justin Chancellor from Tool. It's actually got the Tool bassist, which it's kind of incredible. I actually couldn't notice before, but I love this thing so much. I think it's super great. there's there are noise rock songs, there are like punk songs, there are like really electronic songs. There's like a total glitch fest in the term of the Fear. This thing is super fun. Essential Death Grips listening. Actually, their entire discography is pretty essential, but I love this thing cover to cover. It's a classic. I actually haven't listened to this. I got this for my birthday, but I love this artist. This is a sort of best of David Bowie album. I haven't listened to it yet, but I heard it's got a track that wasn't on an album, so I'm pretty excited to listen to it. I love Heroes. That's probably my favorite David Bowie album, but he's got a lot of classics, so I'm excited to dig through this one. I've actually talked about this album on this channel. This is probably one of my favorite albums I've talked about so far. This is Melting Sun by Lantlos, and I think this is a European cover because it's kind of round looking, if you can see. Like, it's not a total square, and the way you open it is like you don't really. Oh, I guess you can lift it now, but like it originally was you just like pressed and it opened. This thing is my favorite album cover of all time. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it sounds exactly like this. This thing is so beautiful. Getting this in a stereo cut for your car. If you have CDs, I would almost call this essential. This is one of my favorite albums of the last decade. It's incredible. Absolutely listen to this if you haven't. It's the band's Lantlos with an accent over the O. Just amazing shoegaze listen. Just totally listen to it. This next album I've actually only listened to like once or twice, but I saw it for $5 at a thrift store, so I kind of had to get it. This is Permanent Waves by Rush. I love Rush so much. Free Will is a classic song on this one, and so is Spirit of Radio, but it's really good stuff. I just got to keep listening to it over and over again because it's a really interesting transition from hemispheres into moving pictures. There's definitely more proggy elements on this one. There's a shorter track list overall, and I think the songs are overall longer. Total classic. Rush's discography is loaded, and this is no exception. I have also talked about this album on this channel. Another Radiohead pick. This is The Bends. This might be my second favorite Radiohead album. I know a lot of people say it's a lot lower in their discography, and they're like, oh, there's stuff where Tom York is slurring his words a lot more is better. The thing is, I don't know why he slurs his words so much, Kid A and Onward. Of course, I guess it could be considered a stylistic choice, but his words are crystal clear on this album, and that's another thing I like about it. Um, Absolute classic. This thing will drain you by the end of it. It's very sad, but it's such a classic listen. I think Fake Plastic Trees is such a good song, and I know it's one of his more commercial hits, but it's one of Tom York's best ever. My Iron Lung is just got an amazing riff to it. This thing is so awesome. Black Star might be one of my favorite songs, and then the ending is an absolute classic. Absolutely give this one a listen. This is an essential rock listening. And where would I be, the guy who totally hates women, totally watched that video of me talking about feminism in 8th grade, if you don't believe me, without a Weezer album? This is Pinkerton. I love this thing. This thing is awesome. Butterfly, that song makes me want to cry. Just a bunch of classics on here. The bass riff of Tired of Sex like kind of got me into playing bass, as well as a bunch of their other songs. But this one's great. I mean, I know the words can be a little cringy if you just dig into them too hard, but I love this album. It's a great listen. This next album I actually got for Christmas one year because I was asking for some albums, and it's actually not bad. It's just the Beach Boys' last album. That's why God made the radio. Uh, a little overproduced, but it's got some hits on here that are really good. It sounds very nice. This thing might put you to sleep if you listen to it entirely and you're just not feeling the energy because it is their older period. But I like it. I think it sounds very good, and it's a good reflective album. And what do you know? We got the best Britpop album of all time. Definitely Maybe by Oasis. I actually think Kurt Cobain's daughter loves this album a lot. I think I saw her like tweeting or something like that. But this thing is super awesome. Rock and Roll Star is a great opener. Um, where would I be without Slide Away? Slide Away is a great song. When I saw Miley Cyrus release a song called Slide Away and it wasn't a cover of this, I was incredibly disappointed. I was saddened even. I mean, I'm not a Miley Cyrus fan, but if she covered it, I would have definitely listened. Yeah, this thing is consistently great. It's noisy the whole way through, even ugly at a couple points with the amount of noise behind it. And I think not a lot of people talk about that. And their later stuff is a little more shoegazy before they get to like their less important albums. But this thing's a classic. Absolutely listen to it if you haven't listened to it before. It'll take a couple listens to get into, but I love it. And what do you know? The best Radiohead album, you guys can fight me on that. Kid A This thing will kill you if you're not careful. This thing is so sad. Obviously, not death consciousness level, but I sort of have a meme with my friends that if you listen to this album, you're sad. And that's just kind of how it works. This thing is awesome. First of all, that artwork is crazy. The opening sort of synth line of everything in its right place hooks you instantly. This whole album just sets you down and pushes the mood into you. It's amazing. My favorite track on here is definitely Motion Picture Soundtrack. That thing is so sad. That just leaves me stunned every single time. Classic. Absolute classic. If you haven't listened to this, then what are you doing? Speaking of classics, Benito Generation, Caro Bonito. This thing is awesome. I'm not super into pop, as you guys know, but this thing is so much fun. You know, Waking Up is one of my favorite intro tracks in any pop album. This thing is just super awesome. Graduation is a really fun sort of commentary on the education system. That sounds way more deep. That sounds like super deep, but it's really just like I didn't learn anything in school, and I'm like, yeah, me neither. Hey Parents is a really nice track. A lot of these songs are just so sweet, and it's a really good feel good album. So if you're feeling sad, put this on. Probably the best sounding album in my whole box over there. Loveless, My Bloody Valentine. No, I don't know which edition this is, but this thing sounds absolutely gorgeous. You just crank the volume and you just sink into it. Driving with this thing is kind of dangerous because I can't help but focus on the sound. It's so good. Absolutely amazing listen. If you haven't listened to Loveless by now, like, what are you doing? This thing is the quintessential shoegaze album. Some people like a couple other albums more, but this is my pick for best shoegaze album of all time, probably. This will floor you every time. This is easily a perfect 10. Listen to it. People still mention this on Mew. It's just a thread. They're like, why is it so good? And everyone's like, yeah, it's good. This is one of the few albums people can agree on Mew that it's great. This and maybe Dope Smoker. I haven't listened to this album in a while, but if I could describe any album as will make you fall in love with the lady at Jack in the Box, it's Purple Rain from Prince of the Revolution. A little story about that. One time I was going through Jack in the Box drive-thru, and I think some song was playing, and I was sort of eyeing down the lady at the Jack in the Box, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. Because, you know, it's Prince. He'll just get you in the mood for that kind of thing. This album's very emotionally gratifying. They're all classics on here. And Prince's catalog is absolutely loaded with classics, and his guitar playing is incredible. And I feel like not enough people talk about that, but oh man, this thing really bridges the gap between people who appreciate music for being poppy and people who appreciate like good instrumentation and good commentary. This thing is incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, the first ever Dungeon synth record, Heroes by David Bowie. That's a joke, but the second half has a lot of ambient on it. So I actually have that in my D&D playlist for the ambient stuff. I love this album. A lot of classics on here. Sons of the Silent Age is great. And of course, title track Heroes, sorry. Fun fact about this album, it is a King Crimson album. Robert Fripp is on it, so technically it counts as a King Crimson album. Also, Brian Eno is on this, so it's technically a Brian Eno album as well. So you could name this as a King Crimson album, and technically you'd be right. And they actually perform Heroes live sometimes. So yeah, I mean, where are you if you haven't listened to this album? This album is so much fun. It took me a second listen to get into because I sort of listened to it sort of early on in my music listening experience, I guess you could say. But I love it so much. Representing where I'm from, Sublime, self-titled. This was released very shortly around the time where the lead singer actually overdosed. Rest in peace. But there are a lot of classics on this album. Is it perfect? No, I would say it's not. There are actually a couple boring tracks on here, but there are a lot of classics on here also. You know, What I Got, everyone loves, and Santeria is on here too. It's pretty great. I know I mentioned that In the Court of the Crimson King is probably the most essential album in my entire box. This one I'd say is maybe as essential. Neutral Milk Hotel and The Airplane Over the Sea. I've got that poster back there that is of this album. This thing is amazing, and if you don't like it, I don't know what you're doing. This thing is like really good. Some people like Microphones Glow Part 2 more. I'm kind of torn on that, but either way, this thing is absolutely amazing. This thing will bring you to tears, most likely, for the first time. If you don't know the concept, it's actually about Anne Frank for a lot of it, and it's death kind of surrounds a lot of the concept behind this album. It's very sad, but it's also a very beautiful album, and the lo-fi elements are just incredible. Two-Headed Boy is probably my favorite song on here. It's really good. I know I mentioned Iron Maiden all those minutes ago, but this is my favorite Iron Maiden album right here, Number of the Beast. First of all, title track, that thing is incredible. His scream blows me apart every single time. Everyone loves Hallowed Be Thy Name on here. I think every track on here is essential. The only one I wouldn't even like consider like sort of like as good as the rest of them would be Total Eclipse, but it's still a really good song. Gangland, I love. I love Run to the Hills. That thing is a total classic. This thing is loaded, back to front. One of the best heavy metal albums of all time. Absolutely listen if you haven't by now. From one of my favorite prog bands of all time, you got Fragile by Yes. This thing is classic. I actually thought Roundabout was the best song of all time before I discovered another Yes album, but this thing, absolute classic. I love the cover. I love every song on here. This thing feels very complete, and it's one of the few prog albums I could say as a whole never like it feels like a really full album, but it doesn't feel like it's too long like some neo prog albums. Uh, One of the best paced albums of all time. Heart of the Sunrise is one of the best prog songs of all time. This thing is incredible. With some more prog, we got Foxtrot by Genesis. I can mention a lot of things on here. First of all, the opening Mellotron line of Watcher the Skies is one of those gorgeous things ever. Get 'Em Out by Friday is one of the weaker tracks on here, but I actually love it a lot. It's about housing, and then it turns into like a dystopian story by the end of it. It's kind of funny. And then there's Supper's Ready. I think that is Peter Gabriel's strongest vocal performance of the whole thing. A lot of people complain about his voice because it's kind of nasal and kind of weird, but I love this album so much. Supper's Ready is one of the happiest things in my life. Rap classic here. Enter the Wu-Tang Clan. This thing is amazing. The Method Man song, awesome. That thing kills it. This thing is loaded with amazing bars. The whole concept behind the Wu Tang Clan, where it's the 9 people that sort of jump in all at the same time and then just dominate the rap industry, amazing. One of the best rap albums of all time. If you haven't listened to it, what are you doing by now? This thing is awesome. Totally give it a listen. And now I have pretty much the most essential Midwest emo album I could think of, American Football 1. This thing is awesome. I actually have a 2-disc set here. I've not listened to the second disc yet, but I think it's a lot of live stuff and a lot of untitled songs. This thing is really awesome, and it's a little emotionally draining at times, but it's I just gotta mention the opening lick of Never Meant is really awesome. I've been trying to sort of learn that on bass, but I love it so much. This is 2112 by Rush. I love this album so much. The opening track, which is 20 minutes long, is one of the best things to ever come out of rock music. Listen to this if you haven't. Is it Rush's best album? No. I'd say out of my collection, it's probably their worst, if not second to worst, but that's like means it's still pretty amazing. Like, this thing pretty much got Rush into the limelight, for lack of a better word. This thing's awesome. Listen to it. That opening track is awesome. So great. Here it is, the meme, Weezer's first album, Blue Album. This thing's awesome. I think cover to cover, it's super consistent. This is probably the first album I got like into. Like, I know every word on this thing. I can still sing it all back to back. I have a really strong emotional connection to this one, and it just resonated with me, especially at the end of high school. So I love this thing. If you haven't listened to it by now, you kind of have to listen to it. Not everyone likes it, actually, but I think you just kind of have to listen to it at least once. One of the best double albums of all time, Pink Floyd's The Wall. This is actually my favorite. Oh, can't really see the name there. And you guys understand what I'm talking about. Pink Floyd's The Wall is one of the best albums of all time. I actually like it a lot more than their prog material. I think their prog material is a little sort of drawn out and sort of unnecessary direction. But this thing is just awesome. Really tells a nice story. It's very complete. A lot of memorable lines. The whole Brick in the Wall trio of songs is just really awesome. Absolutely listen to this if you haven't listened to it already. Up next, we got probably my favorite Tool album, Lateralis. This is actually a sleeve where there's the album inside, as you can see right there. This thing's awesome. I think The Grudge is my favorite opening Tool track other than Vicarious off of 10,000 Days. This thing is amazing. And then it's got that sort of like 20-minute psych outro. Really awesome album. Songs from this album are played at every single Tool show, and if they don't, people would probably riot. Everyone says Lateralis is like the best song of all time. I would disagree. It's probably not even my favorite song on here, but this thing is amazing. Ticks and Leeches is one of the most brutal songs where Maynard apparently has a scream that lasts a minute long. Absolutely incredible stuff. Essential Tool listening, essential prog listening, essential metal listening, you name it. This thing is awesome. Another Tool classic here, Anima. Yes, Anima. That's how you pronounce it. I watched a video. Another Tool album. This one is awesome. Little interesting fact behind it: Justin Chancellor. This is his first album with Tool, and he wrote about half the bass lines, which is very interesting because you could see how much the previous bassist, whose name I'm forgetting right now, influenced the bass lines on this one, especially with Sober. I think Sober has the most influential Tool bass line. Like almost their entire discography is based off of that bass line, and it's just an iconic bass line. But I love this thing. H is one of my favorite songs. Third Eye is just floors me every single time. Probably Tool's like top 3 songs ever. This thing is incredible. Absolutely listen to it. Next album, kind of a central CD, Nevermind by Nirvana. I love a lot of the songs on here. I think Something in the Way, not just because of the Robert Pattinson Batman trailer, but I love that song so much. I've been trying to sort of learn a bass version of it. This thing's awesome. I mean, it starts off with Smell Like Teen Spirit, which, whether or not you like that song, is irrelevant because the rest of the album is a total classic. If you haven't listened to it by now, you kind of have to. If you don't listen to it sometime in your life, I don't know what you're doing. This thing is as essential as it gets. I love I'm on a Plane on here. That's one of my favorite songs on here. Absolute classic, cover to cover. Listen to it. And now, a massive influencer on the math rock genre, and yet it's probably one of my top 3 prog albums of all time. Red by King Crimson. This thing is incredible. This actually has Bill Bruford of Yes as the drummer, which for me, I think Bill Bruford has the best discography of any one man because he covered Yes's best albums and he covered 2 of King Crimson's best albums, I think, at least. Absolute classic. I think Providence is easily one of the best sort of precursors to post-rock there ever was. This thing's proggy the whole way through. Starless is an amazing outro. I love this thing to death. I could play this any day and still be in love with it. Up next, we've got probably the most essential stoner metalist of all time, Dope Throne by Electric Wizard. I got this around my birthday. This thing is so awesome. This thing will form a fog over your ears, and I think that's kind of the point. I love the concept behind this album where everyone just hated everyone when they made this album, and it really feels incredibly cynical. This thing is pretty rad. I totally recommend it. Next, I got this from my best friend for my birthday. I think this is a really good album. This is Cosmogramma by Flying Lotus. It's instrumental pretty much the whole time, but it features some awesome people like Tom York and Thundercat. Thundercat is amazing. Absolutely phenomenal bassist. If you haven't seen his work, what are you doing? This thing is awesome. Hot take, this is my favorite Kendrick Lamar album. This is Good Kid, Mad City. For a number of reasons, I love this thing to death. I listened to this so much last year. This thing's awesome. I think the title track, Mad City, is easily one of the best hip-hop songs in history. Just like the most iconic opening of all time. This thing is very emotionally moving, and I think it's one of the most complete concepts for Kendrick Lamar. I love this thing to death. The bars are ultra tight and consistent. A lot of classics on here. This thing is cover to cover amazing. And I hope no one's mad at me, but I think this album's a little overrated, but I still love it a lot. This is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West. I'm covering the cover. You guys probably know why if you've seen it. It's censored in a lot of countries, but it's awesome. This album's really great. I at least like every song on here, and I think it's just really good overall. There's nothing I hate about this album. Only a couple tracks here are even close to duds, but I just love it. It's a really good hip-hop listen. So if you haven't listened to it by now, go ahead. And his good friend Kid Cudi's first album, Man on the Moon. I love this thing. I actually might like Man on the Moon 2 a bit more, just sonically, but my favorite Kid Cudi song is on here, and that would be Pursuit of Happiness. The best way to test headphones is Pursuit of Happiness by Kid Cudi. That song has not aged a second. That thing is still incredible, and this whole album is just really great. I love it so much. This next album I haven't listened to yet, but it's Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. I'm pretty excited for it. I heard it's really good. I haven't listened to any of Public Enemy's discography, but I heard this thing is a classic, and I'm really excited to dig through it, so I hope it's good. And now we got the massive successful Red Hot Chili Peppers album, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. This thing is awesome. If you can get past Anthony Kiedis' rapping, and if you just lean into it just a little bit, you're going to have a fantastic time with this album. This thing is grimy and fun. Super fun. Listen essential California core. This album I kind of listened to just because I felt like it, and it's central dad rock. That's what a lot of people refer to this band as. But the drummer of Nirvana made Color and the Shape. This is Foo Fighters. This album is really awesome. A lot of screaming on here, and yet it still is sort of a classic rock kind of sound. I love this thing. There's no reason not to listen to this album. It's a lot of good songs consistently. Probably my favorite opener that's came out of like a pop rock or classic rock album ever. Doll is a great song. Then it leads into Monkey Wrench, and Monkey Wrench is so energetic. I just love it. And I think February Stars is probably one of the most emotionally gratifying songs that Dave Grohl's ever been a part of. So this is a classic kind of. So it's a great album. And now I gotta admit, I'm not totally in love with this album. I'm aware it's a classic, but there is a clear dud track on here. This is Selling England by the Pound by Genesis. But of course, there are a lot of classics on here. Firth of Fifth, amazing. After the Battle, awesome. I think the opening track, Dancing with the Moonlit Night, is so great. And for a prog album to have a person singing on their own for the beginning of it is kind of interesting how they do that. I love this thing. Really good commentary on the British economic system in the 70s. I mean, not that I would know, but it sounds really smart. A lot of good riffs on here. Pretty relatively clean singing from Peter Gabriel. Great stuff. And I've mentioned this band a lot on this album. I love them to death. This is King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard's Nonagon Infinity. I bought this one rather than something like Polygon Dwonderland, which I actually like more, because I was doing a road trip with my dad to get here, and I thought this would be a more accessible album for him. I don't think he liked it, but if you gotta listen to this on your own, it's awesome. Banger cover to cover. The concept behind this, I really don't care that much that it loops all the way through, but it's a consistent barrage of energy. It's really awesome. Good psych, good prog. Listen, I would refer to this album as grunge. Not a lot of people would, but I totally would. It's messy at points, dirty, kind of grimy, but very emotionally gratifying all the way through, and totally angsty, but it's never too edgy, a little bit like Melancholy is. This is Siamese Dreams. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. This thing is incredible, the whole way through. Mayonnaise, absolute classic. If you haven't listened to Mayonnaise, what are you doing with your life? This thing is awesome. Absolutely, just listen right now, because this thing is just something you could talk with anyone about. It's awesome. This is actually the first CD I ever put in my car. This is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by Beatles. Overrated. Highly overrated. I think the song actually has a couple duds on here. I would rather listen to Magical Mystery Tour or Abbey Road or White Album or Revolver for that regard. Pretty much their entire discog around the time this was made I think is better. But a lot of classics on here too. I really like Getting Better. That's one of my favorite songs on here. Probably one of my favorite Beatles songs. But totally give it a listen if you have the time. Where would pop music be without Pet Sounds? This thing is awesome. There is a mono and stereo cut. Everyone has sort of a favorite one. I think the stereo cut is a little much, and sometimes the mono cut, I'm not sure, so I'm kind of up and about with what one I like more. At first I didn't notice the difference, but there's a clear difference if you listen later. The stereo cut didn't come around until the 90s, but the mono cut people tend to like a lot. It's very beautiful, excellent chamber pop stuff, easily lifted Beach Boys to be really legendary. So this thing's really great. This album's my name, and I might get some flack for even owning this thing because it's like sort of 80s landmark album. This thing is Genesis's Duke. Peter Gabriel's not as good a singer as Phil Collins. People know that, and this thing shows how good a singer Phil Collins is. A lot of these songs are very emotionally gratifying, and I'm aware it's a lot more symphonic than their older stuff, but I love it a lot. It's a lot of classics on here. I think there's no bad song on here. I think consistently it's pretty great, and just a lot of good stuff on here. There's a whole concept where this thing actually was supposed to have like a half-hour long song, but they divided it up because they didn't want it to be compared to Supper's Ready, because Supper's Ready is the best Genesis song. That's just true. But this thing I love a lot. If you like 80s pop, listen to this. It's really good. Probably one of the biggest tragedies in music, Nick Drake's Pink Moon. This thing is a classic. I've not listened to Nick Drake's other stuff, but this album is amazing. These songs make me very sad, and that is the point. But very calming music, really good driving music, good folk sound, probably one of the best folk singers of all time. Very underrated album as a whole. Classic. Give it a listen. I listened to this once and I was instantly hooked. Must listen Absolutely essential. Hip hop classic here, one of my favorite albums of the last decade. Kids See Ghosts. I would not say it's entirely perfect, but I love every song on here. I think Fourth Dimension is one of my favorite hip hop songs ever. That beat is incredible. Nothing I've pretty much ever heard goes harder than that song. Absolute classic. If you don't like it, I don't like you. And that's just the cold hard truth, man. This thing is so awesome. Every song is different. Incredibly tight track list here. It's a very short album at around, I want to say, like less than a half hour long, but every song in here is a classic. It's amazing. And to round this off, even though it was in no particular order, this is my favorite album of all time, Close to the Edge by Yes. Oh my goodness. I could not go a day without thinking about this thing. This thing floors me every single time. Close to the Edge is my favorite song of all time, and that's not even like up for debate. Every song on here has such beauty and such intelligence to its writing. No prog album even comes up to it. This thing almost invents a new genre for me with how amazing it is. It's incredibly beautiful, and it's never outlasting itself. The first song, even though it's 18 minutes long, it feels like 4 or 5. This thing never gets old. Absolutely a thrill to listen to every single time. I love this thing more than I love myself or anything else in this world. This thing, if you don't listen to it, I don't know what you're doing. This album changed my life. Alright, so those are my CDs. I also own a few more. I own like OK Computer by Radiohead, Stadium Arcadium by Red Hot Chili Peppers, but those are the ones I have with me right now. But it is like 99% of the ones I have. So those are my CDs. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're considering starting a CD collection, a lot of these are totally valuable picks for things you would need, depending on the genre you're trying to get into. But I love all these albums. They're all really good. So that's about it. If you guys enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. If you subscribe, that helps me out a lot. It's completely free, so don't get it twisted. You don't have any detriment unless you dislike my videos, because then you would get to see my videos for some reason. I don't know why you'd subscribe if you didn't like this, but I hope you guys did. And if you guys have any reason to contact me, go ahead and comment down below, or my Instagram and Twitter will be linked. Go ahead and message me. I will respond every single time. You know, I love you guys. I love talking to you guys. Your conversations are what make me live. I love the community here. You guys are awesome. All right, and that's about it. I'll be sure to come out with some more music discussions next week, and I'll be reviewing more albums for you guys. Sorry for a little bit of change in pace today, but I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have a good day.